So Rebecca Cataldi. I work with the International Center for... privately, I'm the founder of the American Islamic Friendship Project and the head of the Interfaith Committee at my church.
So much for having us. My name is James Patton. I am the Vice President here at the International Center for Religion and Diplomacy. Master's degree in Divinity from the Harvard Divinity, which is known for faith and I in is related to religion, related primarily to identity. Asia.
A lot of things to be done, but one is that we have to change the way that we view conflict and issues of conflict. It's very conflict to own needs and wants, desires, but also think others and what are their needs, what are their wounds, what are their communities and their families in need, and start looking at how we can make a solution that benefits everyone, take care of the needs of. And I think we can play a very important role in that. You know, some people say religion is the problem, but really when you look at most religions, most of them teach core values of loving God and loving other people and treating other people. And it's when we don't follow the values of our religion that we start to have problems and conflict. So to the values of faiths, being able to interact with each other constructively through relationships is really important.
I really understands conflict as primarily as the furthest extension of understanding identity groups that their needs cannot simultaneously be met, and that their qualities are associated with this needs and interest. I see what I do is bring to the table the spiritual values that drive people either towards conflict or drive them towards the mitigation of conflict, which oftentimes are left in terms of diplomatic engagements. Very, very difficult kind of identity. I think that key to get people to transcend the misunderstanding of needs will not be met if your identity continues to exist, is to somehow grapple with the concept of empathy. What it a sense of self, a sense of by virtue of some sort of shared interests or shared characteristics. And I think despite perhaps broad, most everyone has empathy to some degree in their relationships every day, whether it be with a brother or a cousin or an uncle who they might not like but they take care of because they're family, or whether it be with projects in that might people positively who they've never met, but they do it because it's a communitarian sense of action. People have this. The key is to appeal to a broader sense and then apply multiple concepts.
There's a share in terms of our identities that doesn't mean that we take anything away from our individuality or our group. You know, I can be a Catholic, but with Muslims and Jews, I'm also a child of God. Person, and you know, we share that identity. Anything away from personal identity, I think it. But I am an experience, you know, other and family from other faiths, you know, in the same an American with Arabs or you know, I think we have. Take away from our own individual needs and our.
Yes, it's true. The core human faith traditions, I think, are all one of the principles which inspire us be our base instinct, rage, vengeance, all things that drive people into dehumanizing, finding past others outside of their use violence. The to remember is all of actions are trying to lure us into those kinds of behaviors through the divine. There's a human that is has a tendency to vast traditions and use those very traditions as inspiration to do horrible things to one another. So the human history is replete with examples where faith and doctrine applied to the cause of people, right? An example, this is Pol Pot was a Buddhist and then used the Khmer Rouge to apply Buddhist philosophy in a way that led to horrible genocide, right? And does Buddhism principles societal? Does it Islam or genocide have result in this? It's absolutely not. So you have divine inspiration, but you also have human inclination or towards greed and enmity, things that the two pieces have really got to be both grappled with. Do ourselves a disservice, just assume that divinity will inspire wonder. The process involved in engaging in that divinity elevates us, I think, beyond these base instincts that lead us through our principles to do damage to others, including the world and including ourselves, in all honesty. So there's a balance between the divine inspiration and the human, and both of these things have to be.
And I think it's important, there's so many competing ideologies and things for our times, and as religious people really think at our, what would God want us to do in every. I love how in Islam people always emphasize that, God is the merciful, the compassionate. Well, if we're worshiping God that's merciful and compassionate, then we have to be merciful and compassionate to each other. By the way that we live out our faith or don't live out our faith, others around us get in what read Islam, but I went to Egypt a month to study. I really got to meet a lot of Muslim people in the Arab world and really understand that Islam was lived out in a Muslim majority country. And I remember I was kind of nervous at first because, I had this impression that I might be hostile to Americans and I wasn't sure me, but they were and just welcomed me with such love. I realized how much we had in common, that the same values that I so dear as a Christian and as an American, love God, my neighbor, to peace in the world, values that these Egyptians had. And I think you see, in many countries. And so I got a much deeper understanding of Islam and of Islam through meeting these wonderful people there and these relationships. That's how you really start to solve problems, when you start to understand each other, respect each other, and build relationships that you can work together on these issues of us all. So personal interaction is so important, I think, for violent or hostile ways.
Many of the problems, historical problems of religion, could have been avoided of humility and scenarios in which people specifically wants. And every investigation I've done of the spiritual motivations of humanity and doctrine starts with the God knows more than you do, right? And as soon as I start to claim that I know the mind of God, that might be for whoever the practitioner is, aren't I trying to cast myself a bit in the light and the frame of the divine? And that, in my understanding, on self-worship, I think very far from what these doctrinal principles are trying to encourage us to do. So, in terms of what we assume the other person believes based on their doctrine, humility in terms of what we think we're at the table. And I go into conflict areas, for example, whether it be or other work I've done in the past, and I think there are a number of great examples of people doing this in the world. The primary driving desire, violent conflict, it is not to bring an answer, it's not to bring a better way to do it, it's a better doctrine, not to go and impose upon someone else my belief system. What it is there, and what can we do to help manifestation of horrible violence or whatever it might be that is leading to a destructive relationship, which these different doctrines is fundamentally not the manifestation in the world, right? Our whole multitude of characteristics such as love, mercy, etc. And so not seeing that, then to me it means that's not the manifestation of the God that these people believe in. So how can we help that to move from one relationship to the other? And the first step, in my opinion, peacemaker for people who violence against one another is stop thinking you know either what the mind of God is or what the other person thinks, believes, wants, from a perspective of what is it that's on the other person. And you act beautiful book, a Thai Buddhist, writes out of false instruction. How is it I think you think something, and I think that you might have thought something when you did something to my nature, and it's such this whole part of who you are. Acting not real. Imaginings in my head of imaginings, and I think if conflict right now between Islam and the West could very easily be discussed. I've heard plenty of fellow Americans, Muslims, X, or they believe, etc., and they've never had and just the idea of human thinking we know what's happening, we know what's real, we know what the mind, whichever you believe in, is calling and try to manifest principles, kindness of.
And I think, right now is to that environment of love and compassion, of working together to solve problems we can. And as God created Christians, atheists, and so that I have to create it. I can't hate or try to hurt or try to destroy any person He created, any of His. The ultimate respect. I think He wants to take care of each other and to this world, a spirit and an empathy ordained. And I absolutely agree with what James was saying. Sometimes we build these false perceptions and these false assumptions, and especially the hostility, the idea that the other hate, want to hurt us, Muslims hate, Christians hate us. For people, it's not true. I experienced that in a very real way in Egypt, where I was expecting maybe this hostility toward Americans or Christians, and instead I was great hospitality of. But I also experienced perception that a lot had perceptions about Americans or Christians, not like Muslims, think Muslims. And for most people here, it's really we use and work that we're facing as one, Earth community. So to each other, to and our perceptions, and realize we don't know everything. We need to learn, ask people with them. And I was, actually, by my experience in Egypt, found the American-Islamic Friendship, which is a promotion and friendship understanding of America, of Muslim countries, changing messages of friendship. And so we're collecting these messages in a book. I have a copy, actually, that I'm published in the and with messages, and we get some Egypt, Afghanistan, and America. And I started this with the ordinary people, aside from and aside from media, speak to each other. And so I think it's important that we seek that, we listen to each other, than forming our own assumptions in our mind before we've done that.
And so plays about humility. A lot of times in this, we're so overwhelmed problem, the enormity of the problem, that this is a giant issue, that there are big people who are saying, my doctrine says I need to kill this whole group of people, and vice versa. There are armies involved. It's like this girl in Sudan. This is who the world are like. They go home to is poor by Western standards. They don't have a lot of political power. One's conflict, and oftentimes they're not carrying the guns. It's at the level of politics or doctrine, oftentimes kind of misses the point, which is that these violent conflicts driven by continue to put the majority of the population into positions of power, a lack of the inability to access political way that lies that we're talking about. So again, coming back to this idea, we don't have to divide all these small pieces together, transform the situation in a way that affects the lives of the great majority of humanity, which is living through the extreme and through this impacted upon a way that doesn't let them realize what is in many ways understood as given of existence, to find love and to find a connection to both beings and to the divine. It's really, and the reason I like this hanging in the book is so these are the people who are actually living this. These are the people we don't hear from, but this is the majority of humanity. Believers alike. Folks who are being violent conflicts. Try that we connect with one another. Think of the world, kind of pluralistic we're talking about. It's a challenging word for some people, but we think that it's incredibly important that if we're out to people of other faith tradition, connect to people and say, listen, we have so much in common than we have that separates us. And if the truth is we're being driven to aspire to the, which is all of these wonderful properties and characteristics, why over that? Why should we to do? You aspire to love and passion, and we use a different set of texts to get there. Isn't that a good thing? Let's focus on the positive there, because it's more important than these other divisions. And if we have divisions with that compassion and charity, we'll be able to. And so that manifests here in our staff as well.
And PRD as an organization, as people, and we work in different with actors and groups depending on what is the local situation and local culture. But we're not out to change faith or tell them they should be having a different faith. We hope that we can support people to live up to of their own. I think if all of us did that in every part of the faith, we all need self to be a better, to be doing of God in a better way. What can I? And if I'll be better with others who are trying to do the same.
And oftentimes, if you just working at doing enough work to last you, because we all have enough work. I 100% in agreement. Just more of who be in the world, the impact of that will probably be more dramatic than if people
to serve this world that God's given us to love and serve, serving the people created and put with us. That's how we make ourselves better able to enter that beautiful afterlife.
Congratulations, this is fantastic. I'm inspired now to go and use your card to read more about Channel A. If you all are a symbol of what Channel A9 is doing in the world, then you have long life, prosperity. Congratulations. Inshallah, this keeps going very well for you.
And may God bless your efforts and your work. It's really that you would come to us and want to hear from us and have us share our perspective and share your work with us. I think this is how it starts building a more peaceful world, is this kind of conversations and reaching out to each other. So, and reward your work. Congratulations on the anniversary. Teşekkür ederim.